Hello and welcome to Commodity Culture Market Recap, where we break down this week's stories in the commodities space. And on today's episode, a former energy secretary gets real on net zero. Legendary mining investor Frank Giustra talks market manipulation and how to keep those pesky Russians out of the uranium trade. Let's get started. Former U.S. Energy Secretary and former Governor of Texas, Rick Perry, appeared at the PowerGen International Conference in Dallas, where he gave a speech emphasizing the need for fossil fuels and nuclear energy to reach net zero climate goals. During his speech, Perry railed against so-called experts and out-of-touch politicians who are obsessed with inefficient wind and solar power as a means to create some kind of ideal utopia. Perry also said he thinks authorities should be more truthful about net zero climate goals. Come on, buddy. Authorities being truthful in 2022? He also went on to say, "The future of energy is a great challenge that we have, but I'm counting on us getting it right. I believe in this country, which has the will, the intellect, to have that vision to change the world." I wish I could share Mr. Perry's optimistic views, but when you have virtue-signaling sociopaths in charge, it's very difficult to achieve meaningful progress. So what does this mean for the energy space? Well, despite Perry's desire for things to start moving in the right direction, I expect the elites in charge to keep pushing for the so-called new green economy while driving up oil prices and collapsing the economy. But on this show, we don't get distracted by short-term noise, and we're focused on the long term. And I will put my chips down on the table against any ignorant virtue-signaling green politician any day of the week. In short, I'm very bullish on oil, gas, and uranium in the years ahead. Veteran mining investor Frank Giustra appeared on the Jay Martin Show this week, where he discussed the future of gold and how he sees the gold price being manipulated. This is something we've talked a lot about with guests on this program, how the gold price is being intentionally manipulated, as well as silver, by paper contracts on the futures markets. In Frank's case, he stated that although he has no concrete evidence, he's been in the market long enough to know when a drop in the gold price is justified and when it's not. And his theory is that the price is being suppressed intentionally to scare off potential investors and make them believe that gold is not the safe haven asset that many claim it to be. But friends, we all have such short memories. We are all existing for only a speck of time in the greater span of the universe, and people forget that although gold bugs are often accused of being wrong, they've essentially been right for the past, 5,000 years when gold has been used as a currency and a form of exchange. Now, we often hear complaints from people who stack precious metals, especially in the comments section on YouTube, and I'm sure we'll see a few today. Here's a gem I saw recently. "These gold bugs need to start actually being right. This is getting ridiculous. There is patience, and then there is broken clock is eventually right." Well, up until the 1970s, when Nixon removed the dollar from gold backing, people were using gold in everyday transactions. You only need to take the time to understand the corrupt fiat currency system we are currently under to realize it has to collapse at some point. And if you want to do a deep dive on that, there's no better way than my interview with Miles Franklin's CEO, Andy Schekman, where we had a nearly hour-long conversation on precious metals and how they can protect you from the Great Reset. The link to that will be above me in this video. In my view, despite the paper manipulation, every investor should have some percentage of their portfolios allocated to physical gold and silver, one or the other or a combination of the two. Because this is not an investment you hope will go to the moon, it's an insurance policy and a hedge against inflation, and it is the realest, hardest form of money around. If you appreciate this video, please consider liking and subscribing. It only takes a few seconds and does a lot to help out the channel. And if you really want to support my content, please consider giving me a super thanks below so I can keep creating this content for you guys. And now on to a story from Interesting Engineering called "How Russia's Nuclear Power Dominance Can Be Cut Out of Supply Chains." The article is based on a new paper published by Columbia University's Center on Global Energy Policy, which explains Russia's dominance of global supply chains as it relates to the energy-generating commodities, and how countries around the world can reduce their reliance on Russia. Hilariously, the paper mentions China as an alternative to build nuclear reactors for your country. I mean, might as well just go from one human rights violation to another. China's not invading any countries, of course. They're only committing mass genocide at home. So it's okay, right? But I digress. In addition to building nuclear plants, Russia plays a massive role in converting and enriching uranium, and owns a whopping 40% of the world's total uranium conversion infrastructure and 48% of uranium enrichment capacity. In terms of mining uranium, Russia does not play as big a role as, say, Canada or Australia, but you know who does play a massive role? Kazakhstan, the world's largest producer, and some might say a puppet state of Russia controlled by Putin. Now, I seem to remember very recently Putin helping the politicians out there with the whole civil unrest, people rioting violently in the streets thing, and they probably do owe Putin a few favors at this point. In addition, since Kazakhstan ships a lot of its uranium out of ports in Russia, we could see restrictions on supply coming out of that country, and who knows? Sanctions could be levied directly against them as well. So what does this mean for the greatest yellow metal of them all? For those who follow the space, you know that uranium doesn't need any help, as the fundamentals currently in place make it, in my opinion, the greatest trade in the emerging commodities super cycle we are experiencing today. But the current situation with Russia could certainly add fuel to the fire. That's all for this week. Be sure to join me next Wednesday when I'll be interviewing the Endgame Investor newsletter author Rafi Farber on gold and why it is so important to hold in the case of a collapse of the monetary system. And of course, you'll find me here next week for another market recap. Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.